Today's session, we're going to cover the engineering module, at least the main portions of the engineering module, primarily the control setups, the part master and bill of material entry screens, as well as some reports and processes. So we're going to go to the engineering module, data entry, and first we'll cover a couple of major control setups. First, there's a category control where you can define the categories you wish to use as part of the engineering module. This list of categories that you enter here will be available in part study when you're entering parts, and you will be limited to whatever you put in this category control screen so that people can't make up their own categories or mistype things that might appear to be incorrect. So you can create as many categories as you want. You can have up to 3 digits, alphanumeric. You can call them whatever you want, give them any description. The key being the categories are used primarily for lookups and inventory lookups, as well as some reports, on-hand inventory reports by category, sales reports by category, those kind of things. So whatever a category means to you, you can put in category, a control record for those categories to define those. Once those are set up, then they'll be available in part study. Similarly, there is a control for units of measure. You can define any or all of the units of measure that you wish to use. And this same table is used for the stocking unit of measure, the purchasing by unit of measure, and the issuing / production unit of measure, the bill of material unit of measure. They're issued to the pick list. Same table is used for all three, even though all three could be different in a single part record. So you put in a 2-character code and then a description just for reference so that when you're using them, the description will display. And again, whatever you put in here, you will be limited to in anywhere that the unit of measure is prompted in the system. So once you've established these 2 control records, now we can go in and we can enter part records. Now, everything that has a part number must be a part record. We don't have multiple different files, one for assemblies and one for components. We have a single part master file, and when you open it, you establish it as a type, a component or an assembly, or a phantom or a line stock item. So we come up to the parts master screen, and at this point we can enter a part number if we know what it is, or we can right click or double click and drop down a list of lookup alternatives. And these prompts are available everywhere in the system that the part number is prompted. So it's not just part study, it's everywhere the part number is prompted. So I can look it up by partial part number, a model, a word of the description, category, manufacturer part number or vendor part number list, drawing numbers, config IDs, which are part of the product configurator. We will discuss the product configurator in a second engineering session after we're done with this one. We can look up by specification. Specification can be whatever that means to you. It can be colors, length, width, size, material, voltage, anything that means something to you and your industry, or UPC code or customer part number. Now you can look up by any of these just by simply selecting what you want and then typing in what you're looking for. Additionally, you can type in part of the part number or part of the description right here within the part number field. So if I look up everything that starts with 110-, it will populate a list of all the parts that start with that, and I can double click or highlight it and say select, and it will then populate the part master information. Now the part number out of the box is 20 characters alphanumeric. If you need more, we do have mass update procedures that allow us to expand that, but out of the box we had to pick a number, so we picked 20. The load option, everywhere in the system where there's a copy or load function, we do what's called a pull. So you go into the new record and you pull in the old data in there. So I would put in a new part number in the part number field. I would put in the old part number in the load option, and it would load all the data onto the screen under the new part number, and I can make any changes I want. I could tweak the description, I could change the models, but it does load all of the information for me so I don't have to go around and re-entering all that data. We do have a date created that populates when the part master is first entered. The description is an unlimited field that will scroll as much as you enter. The majority of the reports in this system will show the entire description. There are a few places where we'll only show you the first 25 characters for reference, And most of those then have an option to say you want to see the entire description. It's just for brevity purposes and shortening up the report. We may only show the first part of the description. The category is chosen here. You remember cat.control showed us these options, and this is where that comes into play. So you can assign a category, you can assign a model. And again, this is a 20-character alphanumeric field, automatically cross-referenced everywhere the part number is prompted. So whatever model means to you in your industry, you can put that in here. The config ID is primarily used in conjunction with our product configurator, which allows you, from an engineering standpoint, to predefine options for part number and then let the order entry people or maybe other engineering people create parts and bills of materials on the fly based on options chosen. But again, we'll cover that in a later session. The UPC code, one or more drawing numbers, in case you want to track those, the country of origin. This is the current revision of this part. I have no revisions assigned now, but I could use revisions as A, B, C. I could use them as 1, 2, 3. I could do A1, A2, A3. You pick your revision types and how you want to do that. Now there's an ECN history, and revisions can be updated by ECN if you choose, or you can manually control the revision numbers by coming in here and changing the revision on the parts master screen. Again, provided you've got security to do that and you've allowed those people to update the revision field. The status field is a predefined set of options. It's active, it's inactive, it's set for deletion. And then if you set something for deletion, then you run a process called parts.p2, and it will go out and process through all the active data files to make sure that part number is not already used, and either delete the record or give you back a report of where it's used so you can clean those records up before you delete the part. Change in process, which can either be set by the ECN system or can be set manually by the person doing the entry if you're doing manual ECNs and you're not using the whole formal ECN process. This just notifies somebody if they enter a part number, it'll flash a box up and says, hey, warning, there's a change in process on this part. So in case you want to let people know you're changing it and you want to stop them from maybe selling or ordering something that's in process, you want to wait till they get the new revision in place. And then preliminary is another option for new parts. Maybe it's preliminary, you don't have the bill of material done yet, you don't have the routing done yet, you don't have the costing set up, whatever it may be, but you can make it preliminary. But active is the primary approved status, if you will, so that's an A. There are 4 type codes that are defined in the system. It's a component, which is generally something you buy, an assembly, which is generally something you make, a phantom assembly, which is an assembly for which there is no predefined bill of material that you put on the shelf. In other words, you don't build a phantom assembly and then put it on the shelf. You build a phantom assembly as a result of building a top-level assembly that it's on as part of that work order. So it's also called a blow-through assembly by some systems. And then there's line stock, which is more expense parts, screws, washers, string, things that you want to track and you want to show on a bill of material and you want to track costs for, but you're not going to track quantities and inventory. It's a line stock item, so it just deals with it that way. And then the unit of measure, again, which we saw in the UM control, you could pick the unit of measure. Now this unit of measure here on this screen is the stocking unit of measure. When we get to the material control tab, we'll talk about a buy/purchasing unit of measure and an issuing unit of measure that's available to us. So this is the measure you stock in an inventory. Fractions is just an editing tool. If you check this box, it means you do allow fractions to be moved. If this is unchecked, like for this part, this is a one-piece wheel. There's no reason why we should be selling or moving 1.5 of this wheel. So that's just an edit check to make sure somebody doesn't mistakenly type in a half a wheel and either sell it or move it. Marketing control is used in conjunction, with the sales module to pre-assign sales account numbers, cost of goods locations, return locations, things like that. If you don't want to create a single control point for like a sales account number, you want different sales account numbers for different groups of parts. The MRK code does allow us to do that. The shipping information is just that. It's used in conjunction with the FedEx and UPS interfaces. We've got the weight, the length, the width, and the height. And then the separate box just means if I check this, it means this box goes in a separate box. You can't put 2 or 3 in any one box. They need to be separated for whatever reason. There is an equivalent section. If there's an equivalent part number, if I type in this part number, it can pop a box and say, hey, there are equivalents. Which one do you want to use? So this just means it's the same thing. I can use either one. If this box was checked to supersede it, then if somebody typed in this part number, it would say, hey, it's been superseded by the -M. It'll switch the part numbers and it'll give them back that part number so they could go forward with that. Specifications are whatever you decide them to be. In this case, we've got a model and a size and a bolt pattern and a finish and whether it's a one-piece or a two-piece wheel. And these are just models or specs that we created and we built up. So you use any of these specs you want. Again, it can be voltage, ampage, color, material, type, whatever you decide the specs to be. And this is 100% used for lookups. So you want to look up inventory by spec. I want to see a model 10. It'll show me all the model 10s. I want to see all the model 10s with a bolt pattern 52. I select both of those and my search gets more limited. So the more options you choose for specifications, the more limiting your search becomes and the more accurate your search becomes for you. Notes is just that. Anything you want to note about this part that you don't want in the description because you don't want customers seeing it or you don't want somebody else seeing it, but you can put notes here. Now you'll notice there are a bunch of tabs across the top, and these are additional pieces of information we want to define about this part number. So we're going to go through material control next. You can define a part as being lot controlled. If a part is lot controlled, every time it moves, every time it's received, every time it's sold, you got to say which lot is being moved. And then a shelf life, if you choose, if it has a shelf life, then you could put this in, and when it's received in an expiration date, will be assigned to the lot number for you. You can have a buy unit of measure and factor. So in other words, this part was stocked by the each, but I may buy it by the let's say I buy it by the 100, and with a factor of 100, I would put in a purchase order for 1 unit of measure of C. I would price that, I would receive that one, and 100 units would go into inventory. So the receiving process converts based on the factor from the receiving quantity to the stocking quantity for me. So that's just kind of a nice feature to be able to use with your vendors. Low-level code is automatically generated. You don't control this manually, but it's shown here just so you know. It is the lowest level code. This part appears on any bill of material. And this is used by the MRP process to determine how to drive up demand from the lowest level up. Work order labels is just that. Do you want labels printed? Do I want to create a work order for this part? This is kind of where we get into, settings for, this would be a make to order environment. So if I want to create a work order for this part every time I sell it, then the sales order will automatically launch a shop floor work order for me for each sales order. Now, what this means is I'm not building to stock, and I'm not ganging a bunch of sales orders up and creating one work order to build them all. I am a make to order, a custom shop, a job shop, whatever you'd like to call that. You could create that work order, and then you get one work order per line item of a sales order. And it creates it automatically for you. Again, it stops you from having to review your orders and then go create work orders on the shop floor for you. Bill of material unit of measure is kind of the offset of the purchasing unit of measure. If I stock something by the foot, but I want to issue it by the inch. I want to stock it by the pound. I want to issue it by the ounce. That's just a desire you have to change the way you issue material. ABC code is used by the cycle count process. A's, B's, and C's are your high, middle, and low priority parts. There are procedures that will auto assign A, B's, and C's based on factors that you choose. Or you can manually override that here if you decide you want to assign an ABC code. Serial required is just that, is a serial number required for this part. We track serial numbers going out on shipments, and we track serial numbers coming in on returns, RMAs. So if this is checked, whenever you do a shipment or an RMA, you need to put one serial number in for each quantity being shipped or returned. And then when that happens, it updates the serial file with all the information and what date and who it was and where it went, which customer, and all of that information. So you've got traceability on that. Category discounts isn't really an issue much anymore, but this does prevent the cat.control discount from being applied to this part if you choose. Is this part taxable? This is just used as a default in the order entry. It is still overridable if you will, depending on how you're doing taxing, including if you're using Avalara, then this taxable flag doesn't mean much. The Avalara code is gonna come into play. And there are codes that Avalara provides for all your different part numbers. Sales hold, make hold, and buy hold are just what they sound like. Sales hold stops a part number from being allowed on a sales order. Make hold stops it from being allowed on a picker or a bill of material. I'm sorry, or a work order. And then buy hold stops it from being used on a purchase order. If this part is RoHS, which basically means it's it needs inspection, or it's bad, it's acid, or it's something that you need, it's dangerous material, you can flag this as RoHS, and then it'll just flag that on orders and things if you need to show that to the vendor or to the customers. All the information below is linked to this planning group. Most customers have one planning group because they have one manufacturing facility, one inventory warehouse, if you will, with multiple locations inside. Some people, however, have multiple planning groups because they may have a manufacturing facility in Texas and one in Florida and one in California. And each one of those three is going to have unique MRP runs, unique order minimums and multiples, unique lead times, etc. And in those cases, you will set up 3 planning groups, and you'll have planning group 1, then you'll page down and you'll enter planning group 2, then you'll page down and enter planning group 3, and you can set them up that way. Most times, however, planning group 1 will function as everything you need. So that's what we're gonna use here. You can assign a buyer to this and a planner to this, and this allows you to run MRP and planning reports by buyer and planner, and these parts will appear based on those options chosen. The routing can be assigned to a part. As a note, if the part number is the same as the routing number, you do not need to put that here. It will default to that. However, if a group of part numbers or a family of part numbers all have one routing assigned to them, you can put that generic routing in this routing ID, and that way, from an editing standpoint, you don't have to maintain one routing for every part number. You can do it by family. These locations all basically say I'm going to override any of the control record defaults in those modules. So this is my home inventory location, irrespective of what the INB control screen says. This is my home, my work in process location, irrespective of what the WO control screen says. So if you're going to use what the defaults that are built into the system through the control screens, you can leave these blank. You do not need to enter them for every part. But if you want to override these and do something different for certain part numbers, you can control these by putting them in here, and it will look here first. If there's nothing here, it will go to those module control screens and use those. I would then establish whether I make or buy this part, excuse me, and there are actually 3 options. There's a make part, a buy part, and a combination, which is sometimes I make it, sometimes I buy it. Sometimes that depends on lead times and costs and all that. But primarily it's make and buy. The make part will generate work orders, buy parts will generate purchase orders. Down here is where we define how we're going to plan this part. In other words, I can use min-max on this. I can use MRP, or material requirements planning, or I can use MPS, which is master production schedule. Primarily, most people use MRP because it's the most flexible and the easiest way to go about it. Now, absolute easiest way is min-max, but the problem with min-max is min-max will tell you you've just fell below a minimum. So you have a minimum of 100. When you get to 99, it says, okay, you're below minimum, time to place an order. Problem is you're already below minimum. MRP will use some dates and forward looking to say you're going to be below minimum in 2 weeks. So take some action to place an order in 7 days, to be here 7 days after that, so that you won't fall below your minimum. And that can sometimes allow you to keep your safety stocks and your minimums a little lower, because you're not quite reacting at the last minute. You're not just reacting to falling below, you're reacting to a planning mechanism that's telling you you're going to fall below. So we generally recommend MRP being the planning method for that. And then these options, if you want to then make MRP and MPS even more intelligence and more forward thinking than it is, you can set pegging to say I want to see demand, my order policy of D for discrete, means I don't have to answer most of these questions down here. It's 1 for 1. If MRP comes up and calculates that 57 of these are needed, then order policy discrete means it's going to tell you 57. However, if I were to set this to a fixed order policy and have an order minimum of 100 and an order multiple of 100, this is telling me that same 57, when MRP comes up and says you need 57, it's going to round that up to 100, or it's going to round up 157 to 200. So that's these multiples, because either it's something maybe the vendor doesn't sell you less than 100, or from a production standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to set up and run a machine for any less than 100. So these are economic order quantities, basically, and you can set that up using a fixed order policy. There's an order maximum, MRP decimals. MRP decimals out of the box is 0 decimal, everything's whole numbers. However, there are times when you have very minute parts or very expensive parts like silver or platinum, where you get 0.25 of a unit in a gram or something, and you need to order that, or you need that. If MRP set it at 0 decimals, those 0.25 is going to round down to 0, and MRP is not going to tell you anything. If you set this thing to 2 decimals for this part, then this part will show you 2.25, and you won't lose visibility of those very small quantities and part numbers. Safety stock can be any one of two things. It can be a number. By 50, when I get down below 50, I'm going to order back up. I want to keep 50 on hand at any one time. You can also use a function of usage, U1.5. That means 1.5 average monthly usage is my safety stock. So as my usage floats, my safety stock floats with it. Now, this is great for ongoing parts. It's a little bit dangerous on brand new parts and obsolete parts, because when you're ramping up, you don't have usage to base your safety stock on. And when you're obsoleting a part at the end, you might still be ordering things you don't need anymore. So you might want to change these as those things happen. Maximum stock, same thing. Scrap factor. If I put a 10% scrap factor in, then MRP is going to come up and say, hey, you need 100, but you've got a 10% scrap factor, so I'm going to tell you to start 110. So it takes that information in play when it does the planning. Lead time is work days. So this is 14 work days it will take to get this part. So when it does, if this is a buy part and you go to buy from the vendor, it's going to tell you need to place the order 14 work days before the need arrives. So it gives you enough time to get it here on time. Same thing with work orders. It'll tell you that. Customers and suppliers. List of manufacturers or vendors names and their part numbers, customers and their part numbers, and then a list of qualified vendors. Now, the reason this is called manufacturer name and not just vendor name is it's quite possible you're buying from a generic vendor, a Grainger or a warehouse store or something like that. And even though you're buying from them, there's a certain manufacturer and part number you want to get. So you want to make sure to identify to them which one you want. And this comes into play if you've got one part that has multiple manufacturers and your customer or your product needs to have only a certain manufacturer. So this gives you the ability to do that. And down here under the vendors, you just have the vendor number, and it goes out and shows the name, contact, and phone number from the vendor file. ECN change history. There is an ECN system that allows you to update ECNs and mass update bills of materials, routings, and part master files with revisions. This will show you the history of those revisions. If you're using the ECN system, these revisions and description and ECN number and effective dates are all updated automatically by the posting. If you're manually doing this, then you can manually update revision and description. You just may or may not have an ECN number and effective date. Configuration notes we're going to skip because we're not going through the product configurator right now. The images tab, this is where we link images of the part to this part number. Now, we're not storing the image, we're only storing a path to the image, so the path needs to be visible to people on your network. So you have different images, different parts. If it's a JPEG or a bitmap, we will show it to you right here within our window. But if it's a proprietary viewer, even if it's Excel or Word or Adobe or maybe a CAD drawing, as long as you've got the viewer on your screen, you can hit the view button and it will open that window, and you can see that document, whatever it is, whether it's a picture or a image or whatever it may be. Web we're going to skip because we're not using web interfaces right now for our purposes. Change history, there's change history everywhere in the system. If somebody comes in and makes a change, when they hit save, the system goes out and validates or checks all the data that was there before against the data that's there now, and compares each field and tells you which fields changed, what they changed from, and what they changed to, as well as telling you the date, time, and the user ID that did it. So it's pretty nice. And the parts, the BOMs, all transactions like sales orders and customers and shipments and invoices, they all have the same structure. There is an export capability that links into ITAR compliance in case you are ruled by the government controls about who you can ship to. So this is all a separate whole piece of the puzzle in the shipping area. And we'll get to that if anybody needs to cover that. The quality is a somewhat generic set of processes. We set up inspection steps where you can put in letters or numbers or names, whatever you want this inspection step to be called, and then an unlimited inspection instruction. So this inspection instruction can be as long as you want it to be. Again, notice the scroll bar off to the right. So once you get these put in place, when you want to do a QC check on these parts, whether it's receiving a part in from a vendor or receiving a part in off the shop floor, or whether it's an inspection step somewhere in the middle of the job, you can run through a screen called QC.E. It brings up the inspection step, it brings up all the inspection instructions, and then it shows you a separate box to be able to put in the inspection results that were found by the quality people. Again, this is a pretty generic inspection set of instructions because this system applies to a whole bunch of different industries, and they all have their own sets of rules. So we tried to make it as generic as possible. And for those people who need it, we can add additional fields for checkboxes and signatures and things. Lastly, we do attachments. You can attach documents to this part master. That document can be any, you just hit attachments, it's anywhere on the network the attachment appears. It'll attach it to this part master, and anybody who can see this part number in parts.e will have access to the document name. That could be a drawing, that could be a parts list, that could be any vendor agreement with it. Anything that means something to you can be on the attachment screen. All right. So this is the part master screen, and everything that's a part number has to be identified in parts.e. Now, I'm not going to save anything just in case I did something silly. Now, once you've got a part, now we can go to bill of material entry. So now we've got a bill of material, and here again, we've got the same set of lookups we had before by part number. I can look this part up in any one of these, or if I put in the part number we just looked at, I can say, let me see that one, and it'll bring up that bill of material. Now we have a load option here. We have the revision, which comes from the part master. It's the revision of the part and the description. This is not changeable. It's just being displayed from the part master screen. Now, the first thing you might notice that you think looks strange is I got two item number ones. We're doing this to show how we can do phase in and phase out capability. It is not required to do it this way, but a lot of people like to do this so they can see the history of the part on screen, and it makes it very easy. Up through 43017, this part was line 1. From 5117 on, this part was line 1. Everywhere in the system where a bill of material is loaded or displayed or printed, we use an effective date. So whichever effective date is used, I will see either this line or this line, but I will never see both. So you're seeing both here on the entry screen because that's how it's controlled, but you'll never see both on a report or like a pick list or those kind of things. So you can say at this date I'm using this part, and then I got 3 components that go along with it. Now there are 2 quantities for every line because the inventory quantity is the stocking unit of measure, and the bill of material quantity was the BOM unit of measure. Remember, in parts.e we had 2 options. Even though they're the same, we're going to show you both with the unit of measure here. So if they were different, then my quantities would be different. If this was, dozen, then my price or my quantity might be 12, something like that. So it's really easy to define the part by part. You can have start and end effectivity dates as we showed you, and the ECN system does control this, and or you could do it manually. Additionally, you can use actual reference designators if you have drawings with reference designators on them, or you can use this reference designator field as a notes field for your bill of material. Again, you have a scroll bar off to the right, so you have an unlimited number of entries. It's important to remember in the number of levels of a bill of material is unlimited, so you can go down as many levels as you need to go, but you define one level at a time. So I define this part number, then I define this bill of material and or this bill of material, and then I define any sublevels below that, and any sublevels below that, and they will call each other, but I define them one at a time on the screen. Now, to see that, there are some reports we'll get to in a minute, but I also have this option here for view multi-level. So when I click view multi-level, it brings it up in a grid format, and I get a little plus symbol next to anything that's an assembly. So if I want to see what this one looks like, I can drill down below that and see what makes up that part. And if any of those were assemblies, I can drill down, I can drill down, I can drill down, I can keep going. So I got both shown here. I got the cap. These are hyperlinked. So if I say I wanted to see this cap, it'll go out and open any screen that's keyed by the part number because it's hyperlinked. So I can open up any of these other screens. So it's pretty nice to be able to drill down to some of that stuff right from this entry screen. So having done that, now I got a bill of material. When I save that bill of material, it automatically updates the low level code in the part file, and it automatically updates a where used report. So we'll get to the where used when we get to the reporting, where we're gonna go now. So I've got some bill of material reports. I've got a bill of material listing and a cost of bill of material listing. These are single level bill of material listings. And then I've got multi-level indented bill of material and a cost version of that. So these four are the four most popular reports in the bill of material. So if I look at a single bill of material and I look at that part, it uses the effective date of today. And I look at the 110 dash and I say, okay, I can do preview on screen, which will give me a text mode representation. Let me show you that one first. And it gives me a text representation of the report in a format just for quick reference. If I want to see what it would look like were I to email it or send it to a printer, I can use the PDF viewer and I can run process and it goes off, generates the report, but this time it does it in a PDF. It gives me a nicer looking screen with proportionally spaced fonts, etc. So this is what the single level bill of material looks like. Now, if I go down to the next version, which is the multi-level bill of material listing, and let's say I'll go to PDF viewer, and we'll look at 423. Only this time I'll look at a different assembly number, which is a bigger bill of material. And this is one of those cases where the description is going to show us the first 25 characters. But if I need to see the full description, I can just check this box and rerun it, and it'll show me the full description on the report. So if I run this report, now I can see I've got 14 pages. I've got the level being indented here. We don't indent the part number because we want to keep it easy to read. We're not moving the part number right and left. We're moving a level number right and left to keep it in line. So it gives me the entire bill of material. I can scroll down. I can see all the way down like this. This part calls these three parts, which calls this part. So you can see how the indented bill of material can get pretty lengthy if you're deep enough. So again, there are no limits to the number of lines on a bill of material, and there are no limits to the number of levels a bill of material can go. There are some other reports that you can feel free to play with and try: mass change report, comparison reports, things like that. From a where used side, there is a where used procedure that keeps track in case you want to find out everywhere a part is used. I can say, let me see everywhere the cap maybe 10 is used. It'll populate all the assemblies that's used on and which line it's used on. So if I'm thinking about changing cap 10 to something else, I can see the impact of what that change would be, how many places it's going to change. So those are handy little things to use and handy tools. Lastly, in the processes section, on the bill of material, when you enter a bill of material, a part number on the bill of material, it does load the type code from the part master onto that line of the bill of material. Those type codes can then be changed. In other words, something that is a regular assembly in the parts master screen can be changed to a phantom assembly on the bill of material if you want to treat it that way for that one particular bill. If you get down a certain point and you decide you want to undo all that and you didn't want to do that, this reset bill of material type code will sweep through all the bills of materials and reset all the lines to whatever the master code is in the part master file. So it does that whole cleanup for you. Just be careful not to run this if you didn't mean to reset everything, because the only way to get it back is to restore your data. So there's also a mass change update in case you want to do mass changes without the benefit of the ECN, or if you want to load the ECN with all the changes that might come up. There's cost rollups. There's a regenerate low-level codes. There's a couple of places where we do things like a regenerate. And these are primarily because when we're importing data from other systems when you're first starting up, we're not updating the low-level code, we're just converting the parts and the bills of materials in. And now we need to run something to generate low-level codes and generate the where used file. And those are just processes that run. They're not generally something that have to run after entering a bill of material, because those are updated online. All right, so that's the engineering module for today. I hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions, you can feel free to call our support line, and there are people who will be happy to help you with it. All right, thank you very much.